38 years old, made $62,000 a year as a master diesel mechanic, and was watching his life burn to the ground over a plate of lukewarm pot roast. The devastating situation unfolded not in a fiery explosion or a quiet courtroom, but in the polished mahogany dining room of his in-laws' Somerville home. It was 7:14 p.m. on a humid Augusta Sunday. The air, thick with the scent of overcooked green beans, and his mother-in-law Eleanor's $180 Chanel No. 5 perfume, felt heavy enough to suffocate him. He had just delivered the news he'd been practicing for a week, his voice carefully calibrated to sound broken. "The shop. It's over," he said, letting his gaze fall to his worn hands, the knuckles permanently stained with grease that no amount of industrial solvent could ever fully remove. "The last big contract fell through. I can't make payroll. I'm closing the doors at the end of the month." A thick, terrible silence descended on the table. He could feel 10 pairs of eyes on him. His wife, Roxanne, sat to his left, her face a perfect mask of concerned sympathy, but he saw the flicker of something else in her eyes, something sharp and bright. Across from him, her father, Marcus Green, a man who managed a regional bank branch and wore $3,000 Italian suits, slowly placed his fork down. Marcus had never approved of his daughter marrying a man who worked with his hands. To him, Cyrus wasn't a skilled tradesman running a vital local business. He was just a man in a $45 pair of Dickies work pants who smelled of diesel fuel. Cyrus risked a glance around the table. Roxanne's 2 brothers, their wives, her sister, and her husband were all present. The 6 of them lived in a neat little cluster of rental houses on a street called Cedar Lane, a fact that was a constant low-grade source of irritation for Marcus and Eleanor, but a point of pride for Roxanne, who loved having her siblings close. Marcus cleared his throat, his expression grave. "Well, Cyrus, that is unfortunate news." The words were right, but the tone was all wrong. It lacked any warmth, any genuine sorrow. It was the same tone he used when discussing a stock that had underperformed by 1/4 of a point. Then it happened. It started with Roxanne's brother, David, a man who sold insurance and drove a leased $52,000 Lexus. A slow smile spread across his face. He caught the eye of his sister, Tanisha. She smiled back. A current of unspoken energy passed between the Green siblings, a shared, triumphant thought that was as loud in the quiet room as a klaxon horn. And then Marcus Green, the patriarch, the man of supposed dignity, raised his crystal water glass. It was a $90 glass from a set of 12. "A toast," he announced, his voice suddenly booming with a strange, inappropriate joy. Cyrus felt his blood run cold. He watched, as if in slow motion, as every single member of the Green family, his wife included, raised their glasses. Roxanne, his wife of 10 years, the woman he had supported, loved, and built a life with, lifted her glass, the $15,000 diamond ring he'd bought her after a particularly good year at the shop flashing under the chandelier. "To new beginnings," Marcus declared, his eyes shining. "And to family," Eleanor added, her voice syrupy sweet. David couldn't contain himself. He grinned, a wide predatory expression. "And to Cedar Lane," he almost shouted. "Finally ours alone." A chorus of cheers erupted. "Cedar Lane," they echoed. Glasses clinked together in a cacophony of celebration. They were cheering his ruin. They were toasting the collapse of his life's work, the business he had built from nothing with his own 2 hands. They weren't just indifferent to his pain, they were reveling in it. And in that moment, Cyrus understood everything. His failure was their victory. What he didn't know was that this was the moment he'd been waiting for. They thought this was the end of his story. They had no idea it was the beginning of theirs, Have you ever been in a situation where the people who should have been your biggest supporters were secretly hoping for your downfall? We're going to explore what happens when that secret wish comes true in the worst possible way for them. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had to cut ties with family for your own peace of mind. The facade of their life together had been expertly constructed mostly by him. Their home? A modest but well-kept 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet Augusta neighborhood, was a testament to his steady work. He'd personally laid the $6,000 worth of reclaimed hardwood floors in the living room and spent a month of weekends building the $4,500 custom deck out back. The mortgage payment was $1,570 a month, a figure he met without fail, even in lean times. Roxanne, who worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office for about $28,000 a year, saw her income as her personal spending money. His $62,000 salary covered everything else: the mortgage, the utilities that ran about $400 a month, the $550 monthly car payment for her white Acura RDX, the groceries that cost nearly $800 a month because she insisted on shopping exclusively at Whole Foods. He remembered a scene from 3 years prior with perfect, painful clarity. It was a Saturday morning in April. He was sitting at their small kitchen table, a $400 oak piece he'd refinished himself, nursing a cup of coffee in his favorite $15 ceramic mug. He was wearing his usual weekend attire, a faded Morehouse College sweatshirt and a pair of $30 jeans. He was trying to figure out how to budget for a new piece of equipment for the shop, a top-of-the-line engine diagnostic machine that cost a staggering $43,000. It would increase his efficiency by 30%, allowing him to take on more complex, higher-paying jobs, but it was a massive capital expense. Roxanne walked into the kitchen, a vision in a $250 silk robe. Her hair, a cascade of intricate braids woven by a stylist she paid $300 a session to see every 6 weeks, was pulled back from her face. Her deep brown skin was luminous in the morning light. She floated over to the coffee machine, a $700 Breville espresso maker he'd bought for her birthday, and prepared herself a latte. "Morning, baby," he'd said, trying to keep the financial stress out of his voice. "Morning," she replied, not looking at him. She took a delicate sip from her cup. "I was online last night. Neiman Marcus is having a sale. There's this Louis Vuitton bag, the Neverfull GM. It's perfect for summer. It's only $1,200. He blinked, the numbers on his spreadsheet blurring. $1,200. That was nearly 2 months of groceries. It was the down payment on the financing for the diagnostic machine. "Roxy, honey, I don't know. Things are a little tight right now. I'm trying to save up for this new machine for the shop." She turned to him then, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising in an expression of mild annoyance. "Cyrus, it's a classic bag. It's an investment. Besides, your shop is always tight. It's a garage. It's not like it's a real business like Daddy's bank." The casual cruelty of her words landed like a physical blow. A garage. He'd poured 10 years of his life, countless 16-hour days, and every spare dollar he had into building Cyrus Diesel Repair from a one-bay operations into a respected, profitable business that serviced half the long-haul trucks passing through Augusta. He employed 2 other mechanics, both good men with families to support. But to her and to her family, it was just a garage, a dirty place where he got his hands greasy. "It is a real business, Roxanne," he said, his voice quiet. "It pays for this house. It pays for your car. It pays for the coffee in that $700 machine." She waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a bag. I'll put it on the credit card." The credit card, of course, was in his name, and he was the one who paid the $4,000 to $5,000 balance every month. He didn't argue further. He just nodded, a familiar feeling of resignation settling in his gut. He ended up buying the bag. He also ended up taking out a high-interest loan for the diagnostic machine, setting his business plans back by at least a year. The incident was a perfect snapshot of their dynamic: his labor, her consumption; his reality, her fantasy. Her family only amplified this dynamic, treating him like a walking ATM with grease under his fingernails. The escalating betrayal wasn't a single, dramatic event, but a slow, creeping poison that seeped into the foundations of his marriage and his self-respect. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a relentless campaign of casual disrespect and overt condescension from the entire Green clan, with his wife, Roxanne, often leading the charge. They saw his hard-earned money as their birthright and his profession as a source of second-hand embarrassment. One particularly galling memory was from a family barbecue at Marcus and Eleanor's house 2 summers ago. The Somerville home was a sprawling, 2-story colonial valued at over $380,000, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a backyard that looked like a page from a magazine. Cyrus had spent the morning at his shop dealing with a catastrophic engine failure on a Peterbilt truck, and he arrived late, still in his work clothes. He hadn't had time to go home and change. The smell of diesel clung to his shirt. He walked onto the patio, where the family was gathered around a massive $4,000 stainless steel grill. Marcus was holding court, a glass of $80 single malt scotch in his hand. He took one look at Cyrus, and his upper lip curled in a barely concealed sneer. "Cyrus," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "good of you to join us. Did you manage to wash the shop off you before you came into a civilized home?" Laughter rippled through the family. Cyrus felt his face flush with heat. He looked at Roxanne, hoping for a word of defense, a supportive glance. Instead, she just shook her head with a little sigh, as if he were a disobedient child who had tracked mud on a clean carpet. "Honestly, Cyrus, you could have stopped at home," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. "You know how Daddy is about cleanliness." Later that evening, he overheard a conversation not meant for his ears. He was inside getting a bottle of water from the kitchen's $12,000 Sub-Zero refrigerator when he heard Roxanne's sister, Tanisha, and her brother David talking in the adjacent hallway. "I just don't know how she stands it," Tanisha said in a stage whisper. "The smell. And he's always so tired. All that manual labor. It's so common." "Tell me about it," David scoffed. "But hey, at least his common labor pays for her Acura. And it helps us with the rent on Cedar Lane. We have to give the man that. He's a useful beast of burden." A useful beast of burden. The words hit him harder than a fist. He stood frozen in the kitchen, the cold water bottle sweating in his hand. He looked down at his calloused palms, the network of small scars and healed-over cuts that told the story of his life's work. He had always been proud of those hands. They were the hands of a man who built things, who fixed what was broken. But to them, they were just the dirty paws of an animal that provided for their needs. He walked back out to the patio, said nothing, and endured the rest of the evening with a hollow ache in his chest. The Cedar Lane situation was another constant source of humiliation. The 6 Green siblings lived in 6 identical rental houses on the same street, a cozy little enclave of family. What they never let Cyrus forget was that he was the reason they could afford it. The landlord, a faceless property management company based out of Atlanta, required a significant security deposit and first and last month's rent up front for each house. The total came to nearly $27,000. None of the siblings had that kind of cash. Cyrus had fronted the entire amount. He had taken it from his business savings, a fund he was building to one day expand his shop and buy the land it sat on. He did it for Roxanne because she'd pleaded with him, telling him how much it would mean to her to have her family so close. "It's an investment in our family, baby," she had cooed, stroking his arm. "They'll pay you back, I promise." They never did. Not a single dollar. When he gently brought it up to Roxanne a year later, she had become indignant. My God, Cyrus, are you really going to hold that money over their heads? They're family. What's yours is ours. That's what marriage is. Their complaints about the rent were unending and always directed at him as if he were responsible. Tanisha's husband, Jamal, who worked in IT, cornered him at a Christmas party. Man, this rent is killing us. $1,450 a month for that little box. The landlord won't even fix the leaky faucet in the guest bath. You'd think for that kind of money, you'd get better service. Cyrus just nodded, absorbing the complaint. He knew for a fact that the property management company was exceptionally responsive. He also knew that the market rate for a 3-bedroom house in that area was closer to $1,700 a month. They were getting a deal, but in their minds, they were entitled to more, and he was the one who should somehow provide it. They saw his bank account as a communal resource and his hard work as their safety net. The disrespect was a constant grinding pressure, wearing away at his love for his wife and his tolerance for her family until there was almost nothing left. He had no idea just how deep their entitlement ran, but he was beginning to suspect it was a well with no bottom. The discovery, the moment the final, fragile pane of glass shattered, happened on a rainy Tuesday night in October, 6 months before the fateful Sunday dinner. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or an intercepted letter. It was a quiet, sickening revelation, delivered through the cold blue light of a smartphone screen. Cyrus had been working late, wrestling with a stubborn fuel injector on a Cummins engine. He finally got home at 9:30 p.m., exhausted and smelling of solvent. The house was quiet. Roxanne was already in bed, asleep. He took a quick shower, the hot water doing little to ease the deep ache in his bones. He climbed into bed, careful not to wake her. Her phone, a $1,300 iPhone 14 Pro, was on her nightstand, buzzing softly. A text message notification lit up the screen. He glanced over, not out of suspicion, but just out of habit. And then he saw the words. It was a group chat. The name at the top read Green Machine. It included Roxanne and all 5 of her siblings. The last message was from her brother David. David, did the work mule deposit the rent money yet? The first is Friday. Cyrus's heart stopped. The work mule, that was him. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He knew they were disrespectful, but this was different. This was their private name for him. This was how they saw him in the unguarded moments when they thought no one was listening. He carefully picked up the phone. Her passcode was her birthday, a simple 6-digit code he knew as well as his own. His hands were trembling as he unlocked it and opened the message thread. He started scrolling up. It was a graveyard of his dignity, months, maybe years, of their private thoughts laid bare. Tanisha. Ugh. Cyrus smells like a gas station again. Roxy, you need to make him shower outside. Roxanne. LOL, I try, but you know how he is. At least his hands are good for something. $1 Jamal, Tanisha's husband. Speaking of which, is he going to spring for that beach trip this year? I'm not paying for my own flight to Destin. Roxanne. I'm working on it. Have to massage the beast's ego a little first. Tell him how proud I am of his little garage. He kept scrolling, his breath catching in his throat. They mocked his clothes, his truck, a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles that he kept meticulously maintained. His simple tastes, his love for his work. They shared photos of him sleeping on the couch, exhausted after a long day, with laughing emojis. And then he found the thread that broke him completely. It was from about a year ago, when his business had a genuinely tough quarter. A major client had gone bankrupt, leaving him with a $30,000 unpaid invoice. He had been stressed, quiet, and had confided in Roxanne, telling her he was worried about the future of the shop. Roxanne, in the group chat, C is having a meltdown about the shop. Thinks he might go under. Honestly, it might be for the best. David. For real? What would happen? Roxanne, he'd have to sell it. Probably get a real job, maybe something in management. We'd have a normal life. No more grease. And he'd have to sell the properties to get cash. The properties. Cyrus's blood turned to ice. She knew. She had to know. Tanisha. Wait. What properties? Roxanne. The Cedar Lane houses, silly. Who do you think your landlord is? He bought them all back in 2017. Has them in some secret company name. He thinks I don't know. He felt the air leave his lungs. He sank down onto the edge of the bed, the phone heavy as a block of lead in his hand. She had known all along. For 5 years, she had known that he was the owner of her siblings' homes. She had let them complain to his face about the rent. She had pleaded with him for the security deposit money for houses he already owned. She had participated in this charade, this elaborate humiliation, every single day. And her end game was clear. She wanted his business to fail, so he would be forced to sell his assets, her family's homes, and they could somehow take them over. The phrase David had used in his toast echoed in his mind, Cedar Lane. Finally, ours alone. It wasn't a spontaneous celebration. It was a long-held plan. He placed the phone back on the nightstand, exactly as he had found it. He looked at his wife, sleeping peacefully.